Alright guys, common issue here today behind the wheel of a Chevy 2500 HD 2005. Slop in the steering wheel as you move it back and forth. This is significantly better than it was, but the only thing I haven't replaced in the entire steering linkage is the Pitman arm. We'll get to that in a second as to why I haven't done that, but we're going to do that today. That's what this video is about, replacing the Pitman arm. One other issue I'm chasing with the steering is when you turn to the left, the effort is very little. It's overly assisted, I would say, and then turning to the right, it lacks assist. It's high effort. I imagine that's the power steering pump, and we won't be dealing with that today. I've got an idea that that might be the control valve. Hey, if you're watching this video, let me know what you think there, if you've dealt with this situation before, as to what that might be. But pretty much all the tie rod ends, the ball joints, all of that is new. I've already replaced that, and today I'll be doing the Pitman arm. I'll be back with you shortly as I set up. So here we're looking at the Pitman arm for this 2500 HD standard part. You know, if you guys go looking, this is a 6-liter gas motor, by the way. I guess I can't say if the parts may be different for the diesel. I'm guessing they're not different for the 8.1. But there are two different types that Chevy manufactured with. There's a 3-lug version and a 4-lug version. Obviously, before you go to replace this part and you order a part or go to the parts store, make sure you know which one you got. Take a look at the one the spline shaft on your steering gear before you go there. I've gone through and replaced all the tie rod ends, the idlers, the whole mess, everything except the relay rod itself. And we'll crawl into the truck here momentarily, and I'll show you that. I knew that the idler was bad, and I knew that the Pitman arm was bad, so I went through and replaced it all. When I went to do the Pitman arm, I have a pretty standard, I guess I'm used to working on small cars, I have a standard Pitman Arm Puller let's get you in frame here. Obviously no fit. So I know there's other options. I've seen guys replacing the Pitman arm without having to mess with the steering gear. Right or wrong, I ordered this Pitman arm remover. Too big, really, but we're going to see if we can make it work today. Let's go get under the truck. So we're under the truck, guys, and there's the Pitman arm, the one component I haven't replaced in all of this mess. I know the joint, excuse me while I reach over and point at it, I know this joint is loose. The ball joint is loose in the socket there. So I've replaced everything else. This is the idler assembly that I'm attempting to show you around the sway bar. I've replaced out the inner and outer tie rod ends. Still have some play. There's no play in anything but this guy. So getting a socket, I don't have the right size wrench, so getting a socket on that is nearly impossible with the truck frame in the way. So I'm gonna unbolt the steering gear and see if I can rotate that one way or the other to get that unbolted. Of course, sliding a little bit further under here, you gotta take that nut off. That's a 21 millimeter. As you can see, that's been reefed on by somebody, a previous owner. Don't bang on those. I guess I'll cover that in this video too. You do use a hammer, but don't be using a pickle fork. Use a hammer, strike the side of the relay rod, and I'll demonstrate that here for you. Also a note for you guys that may be dealing with this situation. I'm going to come over here off to the side. Sometimes the steering rack play that you might get, or the steering gear play, is often one of these two shafts right here. This shaft has a U-joint down at the base of the steering gear. I've replaced all of those parts as well. I've even been told that this upper intermediate shaft You may not be able to feel the play in the shaft itself, but then you can feel it through the wheel. I do know this lower intermediate shaft had a bad U-joint. There's a lot of play in that, so that got replaced. And I've also replaced the steering bushing in the bottom of the column. So this is being completely rebuilt, and we'll see how it goes. For you guys, I'll attempt to capture it, but these 3 bolts right here are the ones that hold the steering gear on. They're also 21 millimeter. Should be pretty easy to just zip them out. I'll probably leave one partially threaded in and rotate it off that. I'm not planning to take any of the plumbing loose. I may need to take this lower intermediate shaft loose, which, if I remember right, is an 11 millimeter down at the box. We'll be right back. Alright guys, my 2 cents here. I dug a pickle fork out of the drawer. I never ever use a pickle fork. I had to go digging for this one. I bought it years ago when I had no idea what I was doing, but in general, ball joint type connections, don't use a pickle fork. There may be a few situations where it's called for, but in general, what I end up doing, take the nut loose. This is just, you know, few threads on is all. And this one I had already worked on in previous weeks, and so this one just came apart. I've got a pry bar in between the relay rod and the joint, and what I end up doing is you just take a hammer and a couple of decent whacks. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 maybe, and between the pry bar putting some pressure on it and the harmonics that are sent through the joint, it loosens up. I leave the nut on so that it doesn't spring apart on you. Don't like parts flying or taking them to the face. Now this one is still, it's loose, as you can see there, but I can't take it apart yet until I take the idler nut loose. I'll probably end up, it's got a 2-bolt connection up here. I'll probably take those loose instead. That's easier in my opinion. Again, I think those are 21 millimeter if I remember right. If after a couple of tries the pry bar and hammer don't work, grab the propane torch. Just put a little heat in it. Obviously not enough to burn the rubber, but you know, just apply some heat just to get some metal expanding a little bit. Heat the relay rod itself. Don't be putting any heat on the ball joints. Relay rod. You want the relay rod bigger. Back under the truck here, I ended up taking the steering gear completely loose, taking out all 3 bolts, and I attempted to hang it up in such a way that I could show you this process. I've already taken the nut off. That was a 32 millimeter. There was no way for me to fixture it up there in a way that I could show you guys in this video. But here, Pitman Arm Puller. The puller I have happens to be 19 millimeter. I'm just using a ratcheting wrench, and we're gonna pull this Pitman arm off. I'm sorry that I'm piecing this together for you guys. I wish I could show you this under the truck. I ended up fairly quickly discarding my ratcheting wrench. This got fairly difficult pretty quick, and I like to do things the easy way if at all possible. So I grabbed the impact, it's 19 millimeter, and just you know, barely even a couple of touches with the impact, and it came apart. So we're going to put it back together in reverse order, but going back together, I don't use the impact. If I remember right, obviously check your factory service manual, but I think this nut calls for around 50 foot-pound of torque, so don't be acting like a gorilla and hitting it on high speed with the impact. I put all this stuff back together by hand. Alright, so for reassembly, just to kind of pick up where I left off, the steering gear is loosely bolted onto the frame. For you guys that are new, just remember, just put things together, everything back together before you actually start tightening anything down. Not probably such a big deal here, but just general practice. So I've got those 3 bolts on the exterior, rolling back around over here. I checked my factory service manual. These 3 bolts here, you'll do those up to 110 foot-pound. A note which contradicts a little bit of what I said before. I looked at the factory service manual. The steering gear to Pitman arm connection is supposed to be at 184 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that goes that high, so I use the impact. One of the rare occasions where I'll ignore my own advice. Otherwise, the connections, to show you guys how I got the relay rod to just kind of drop down, I take the idler out at those 2 connections, those 2 bolts, and just kind of swing it out there. That'll swing back in there real nice and easy. You put the bolts back in. The rest of the connections here, factory service manual says 46 foot-pound, which, as I understand, includes those 2 bolts. If you happen to take the idler, let's get that in frame right. Not doing a good job of that right now. If you took the idler loose at that connection, this one right here, that connection, basically all of these are 21 millimeter connections, 21 millimeter bolts. Those call for 50 foot-pounds. So hopefully this takes care of any of the steering play I have in this truck. This is the Pitman arm that I just took out. You can see that the boot is broken. Not that tells you anything in particular, but let's have a little closer look, see if I can show you guys the play. I definitely had play when I took a pry bar to it. And here on the bench, you can't really feel the play much. You definitely had play in the truck. So remember, on these bigger trucks, we got pretty high loads. You know, even the slightest little bit of play there will be magnified. So, well, proof will be in testing after I get this thing all back together. After this, look for the next video. I'm going to show you how to align your truck in your driveway. See you guys later. Okay, to wrap up the Pitman arm install, I'll tell you that took pretty much most of the slop remaining and the steering out. The gearbox might need a little bit of adjustment, but for the most part, I took it for a test drive. Everything looks good there. Now I'm hoping that some of you guys that are watching are seasoned veterans here and might be able to point me in the right direction on that steering effort issue. Again, it turns real nice and easy, pretty much too easy to the left, and it's a lot harder and doesn't self-center when you're turning to the right. And actually, the self-centering might be the other way around. It's too easy to the left and it doesn't self-center. If that detail matters, please let me know. Feel free to comment. I recognize this is only my second video I've done over the course of the last 6 months. But there's plenty more to come. Next video I'm going to do, which hopefully should be in the next day or two. I'll align the truck in my driveway. I'll show you how I do that. I won't claim that it gets it 100%, but it's a heck of a lot better than doing nothing. I'd say it's probably 98, 99%. Particularly when you're chasing issues like this, I find it nice to, before you take it to a proper alignment shop, to do a driveway alignment so that if you have more issues you're fighting through, you can go ahead and drive the truck and not worry about tearing up tires or something like that. Particularly if you're putting a lot of miles on a vehicle you keep on working on. So Obviously, comment below. Feel free to subscribe. More videos to come, both in the working on this truck and other things. Thanks for joining, guys.